Zach, one of the big things that a lot of people have been talking about is this news concerning the Progressive Caucus, which, as I noted, is on a day-by-day basis further and further diluting any meaning left in the word progressive. I mean, at this point, what does the progressive movement even refer to if the Progressive Caucus is endorsing none other than Shontel Brown, who, if you aren't familiar with, is Nina Turner's opponent for Congress? And if you guys have been watching the Vanguard for a while, you might know the fact that Zach and I have been, let's just say, disappointed in Nina Turner as of late. We think she's been a little bit underwhelming as far as her message goes and her strategy goes. But that being said, there's no doubt she's more progressive than Shontel Brown, right? And if the Progressive Caucus doesn't exist to endorse and support candidates like Nina Turner, then why do they exist at all?
Well, I think we know exactly why they exist, Gavin, and that's because it's to give the veneer of progressivism to these politicians and to these Democrats who have absolutely no intention of enacting any kind of progressive legislation or progressive policy. They're here to represent the neo-corporate progressivism, right? I call them neo-progs, right? But the Silicon Valley kind of like, oh, we don't hate gay people. You can, wear whatever you want to work, but that's our definition of progressivism. We still get to make as much money as possible and pay no attention to marginalized communities who our ambitions, are detrimental to or cause harm to. And I think that that's the big break, right? So they're progressive in the same way that Pete Buttigieg is progressive, right? Or Kamala Harris can call herself a progressive, right? Just to kind of win brownie points. It's hysterical to us as authentic leftists, right? But there's a reason that she raised her hand on the debate stage when people asked if she supported Medicare for All when she explicitly did not. There's a reason that folks like Pete Buttigieg like to say, oh, I'm a progressive. I'm a progressive if it means X, Y, or Z. That's not actually progressive, right? And then, they'll still wear that as their whole kind of label because they know who is popular and who's is Bernie Sanders, right? And this comes after a big break. I don't know if you saw, Gavin. I'm sure you did, and I'm sure a lot of our people listening in the audience saw. Bernie Sanders came out. He enthusiastically endorsed Nina Turner. I think it was last night, 2 days ago, something like that. So this is a little bit of a break from that. So yeah, he says, today I enthusiastically endorse Nina Turner for U.S. House in Ohio's 11th congressional district. Nina is a real leader who fights for higher wages, Medicare for all, and affordable prescription drugs. Fair endorsement, right? Obviously, Gavin mentioned we've been less than thrilled with Nina as like a bastion of change, but obviously, if we were in Ohio's 11th congressional district, we'd show up on the election day and fucking cast our vote for her just because, on the case of, higher wages, Medicare for all, and affordable prescription drug prices alone, she's a far better candidate. But yeah, I think that what they're going to try and do is they're going to start having Shontel Brown pay more lip service to things like Medicare for all. And then she'll kind of twist it probably into like, again, that Pete Buttigieg Medicare for all who want it type of language, or X, Y, or Z. And then, of course, that all gets lost in Congress because they'll never hold a vote on it. And that was one of the main reasons a lot of us wanted to vote on Medicare for all, so that people couldn't keep doing this if they didn't actually support it. We could be like, no, you very clearly do not support Medicare for all, right? And what did we call that? What did people call that, Gavin? I think it was called force the vote, but who remembers, right? Anyway, I'm just saying, I think that's our whole, deal with the Progressive Caucus. And obviously they've beclowned themselves and they've exposed themselves as not being anything related to the progressivism that you and I value, which is authentic leftist politics, but rather this veneer, this show, virtue signaling, shoddy leftism.
Very well said, Zach. Very well said. Absolutely. And as you guys can see here, David Sirota, who, I've dunked on my fair share. I think that every once in a while the guy is a bit cringe. But that being said, usually when it comes down to it, when it comes to the substance of things, like 9 out of 10 times, the guy's pretty on point. So, of course,
as long as no celebrities are in the room.
Yeah, exactly. But again, I'm happy to give credit where it's due. And more often than not, I am giving it to David Sirota, someone that's, predictably, consistently pretty based, pretty on point when it comes to the substance of these matters. And as he says here, let's be clear, this is very likely Pramila Jayapal, who, by the way, is the chair of the Progressive Caucus, this is very likely Pramila Jayapal selling out the entire movement because of her unbridled ambitions to get a fancy but meaningless leadership title among a House Dim caucus that will be obliterated in the midterm elections. A total betrayal on every level. So that's pretty damning. And again, Sirota was in the Bernie campaign, and Jayapal was a supporter of the Bernie campaign as well. So you would think that Sirota and Jayapal probably have at least some level of friendship. They probably have some experience together and are fond of one another. I think it's a pretty big deal for David Sirota to be coming out here and in no uncertain terms, not only calling this a betrayal on every level of the progressive movement, but also basically implying that Jayapal is only interested in her own career. In fact, he's not even implying that. He's basically just straight up saying that she's a careerist Democrat that cares more about ascending the leadership ladder than she is about the progressive movement or about helping, supporting, or endorsing any progressive candidates, such as Nina Turner, who, again, I have my issues with. I think that she's let down the movement in some serious ways, and I hardly, think sending her to Congress is going to result in the kind of change that we really need. That being said, as you said, Zach, if I lived in her district in Ohio, I certainly would show up to vote for her, and I encourage anyone listening to do the same. And again, if the Progressive Caucus doesn't endorse people like Nina Turner, if it doesn't support Bernie Sanders endorsed progressives running on policies like Medicare for all, like Nina Turner, then why the fuck does it exist? It's just crazy that it's come to this point. And again, a lot of people thought it was a good thing when Jayapal became chair of the Progressive Caucus. This was kind of heralded by certain folks as a potential return to form for this caucus. Maybe now it'll have some serious sway. As we've seen over the last year or two, that has simply not come to fruition. And now it's just straight up acting as an asset of the Democrat establishment in supporting Shontel Brown, who's much more of a blue dog Democrat than a progressive Democrat. So it's really just insane that this has happened, and so revealing about the fact that the Progressive Caucus is merely a front. It is an asset of the Democratic establishment. And at this point, it's simply working on their behalf to crush any remaining progressive or democratic socialist sentiment that's left. Very little is left, but whatever is left, the Progressive Caucus is now working hand in hand with Democratic leadership to stomp it straight out of existence. And of course, Pramila Jayapal is leading this charge and 100% complicit herself.
Yeah, and I think that the only caveat that I would add to David Sirota is this is Pramila Jayapal selling out the entire movement for the second fucking time, guys. What did she do early on in Biden administrations when we actually had some leverage, when we were trying to get Build Back Better passed? And admittedly, guys, there were provisions in Build Back Better that I was not a fan of. There was lots of corporate giveaways, but there was also a lot of really good stuff that would have alleviated the suffering for a lot of people. Gavin and I talked about it at length. We were skeptical that it would ever get passed in the first place. In fact, in our infamous Ryan Grimm interview, we debated him about what how much we would actually get out of Joe Biden in terms of infrastructure. And he was like, oh, we're going to get way over $3.5 trillion. And I was like, you're on crazy pills. That's not going to happen. Blah, blah, blah. We have bet about it. We were way right. But that doesn't mean that it wouldn't have been beneficial to some populations to have Build Back Better paths, right? It's not like we need to bow at Joe Biden's feet if he was able to get it done. But it would have been beneficial, right? And Pramila Jayapal played her cards just like absolute dog shit. So did Ro Khanna, but he defended her senselessly after her decision to say that she trusted, the Senate and Congress to pass the legislation, even if they decoupled it. So they had this paltry, reductive, not good enough, flimsy, infrastructure bill. And then they had the real Build Back Better Act. They separated them with the approval of Pramila Jayapal. She said, yep, I'm going to vote for this, even if you separate it, which was lunacy. Lunacy, I tell you. We said that a million times. We were like, guys, if you give away, like the Democrats pretend that they have no understanding of leverage. They do. They just hate winning. They love fundraising off of failure. That's almost what they exist to do, right? And Gavin, I always get frustrated when I'm like making a point and somebody pushes back and is like, oh, that's just the Democratic Party's designed to be an op, bro. It's just designed to be an op. But it's getting so you can't get around it in a conversation like this. The Progressive Caucus is 100% there to deflate any kind of progressive movement, to undermine it, to make it seem not serious. This is exactly what they did with Force the Vote, right? With the assistance of the squad, no less, in that instance, right? But they completely tried to invalidate it, to make it seem unserious for them to wield any kind of leverage. They pretended that they were kicking the can down the road to wield leverage, and then at every single opportunity that they actually could have, use some torque to extract a little bit of something extra for the people, they fucking folded like a deck of like a house of cards. I almost said deck of cards. Deck of cards just don't fold. But anyway, you know what I'm saying, guys.